Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're back with In Context 7. Today's topic is how did the interested parties, the surrounding countries, and the global players, that's what I mean by interested countries, how they're reacting to the revolution in Syria. For example, what's US's reaction? What's Israel's reactions? What's EU's reaction? Russia, Turkey, and the Arab countries. Complicated question, but I think it's something we need to understand. I think it's fair to say we're not going to project what we think we're going to do in the future, but we want to put in context how they are reacting to the current events, correct?
Yes. So today is Saturday, December 28th. So just to keep things in context, what we're trying to do is to try to gauge the way the various actors in the Middle East are perceiving the revolution in Syria. And to my mind, the value of this is in appreciating how important is this event and how it is being appreciated or estimated by the various actors as an advantage, an opportunity, or a threat. So to first set things up, in my opinion, what we have seen in Syria was a natural rebalancing of influence between the direct actors in Syria, meaning Turkey, Syria, and Iran, and it represents the weakening of the relative positions of Russia, Syria, and Iran, and it represents the relative weakening of Russia and Iran versus Turkey. There is a lot of more important or also important factors in here, but strategically speaking, from a power balance point of view, what we're seeing is not that Turkey has become stronger internally, but that Russia has become weaker and Iran has become weaker. And as a result, the actor that is mostly supported by Turkey is now dominant in Syria. So we can start from there. I'll start by the US because the US is the organizing power of the international colonial order. So that's where you start the top. The US is officially and publicly saying that while we are not very amused with or don't particularly like the people who are in charge in Syria, we don't trust them, we're willing to give them rope. And I think that is actually the case, meaning while typically international actors will lie and deceive to hide their intentions and goals, in this particular case, the US is not being disingenuous as its usual nature, because it doesn't have to. So while I don't think the US instigated this change, it doesn't mind it because in the end, Turkey is a regional power that wants to exist within the international order, and it cannot go against strategic interests of the US. They see and understand that the power that took over in Syria is closely aligned with Turkey, so they don't expect much danger. And those who took over has been careful to say that. So the US is willing to give it rope to see how far it can go.
Yes, I actually agree with you pretty much wholeheartedly on this. I don't think the United States caused it to happen, but they allowed for it to happen. They were okay with it transpiring. And I think what you say about Turkey is very important. I think especially with the Trump administration coming in, it seems it would be in his sort of within the way he sort of thinks to say, you know what, I'm tired of this place. We're getting out of the Middle East. Turkey, you deal with it, it's your problem. Just don't let them start bombing Americans and don't let them reform ISIS and keep Iran out. That's probably like the stipulations that were given to all actors. And I think Turkey and the new Syrian government would agree to play by those norms. And look, I think it's the best. It's in the best interest, in my opinion, right now, for the new government to avoid getting immediately into a conflict with the United States and Israel, to be perfectly honest, but especially the United States. If this new government is in the crosshairs of the United States, it's never going to function. So I think the smartest thing for it to do is to be pragmatic, to still go about its agenda, to not be bullied by Alawite, hanger-oners from the previous regime, or, militant secularists that want to turn Syria into some kind of party ground. And I think that this government, at least to what I'm following so far, seems like that's what their plan is. So I think that you're right. The United States, didn't necessarily welcome it, but they're willing to tolerate it. Because let's be honest, the United States, it made it pretty clear across administrations, getting beyond the conspiracy theories, that, the Assad regime was a problem for many different reasons. I mean, Trump bombed them last time, right? And Biden was hardly sympathetic to their cause either. So I don't think the United States could, justify saying, no, we are opposed to this because we support what? What's the alternative other than Assad? So, yes, I agree. I think the United States allowed for this to happen. And for now, I don't think they know exactly what to do. So they're going to sort of play it by ear and see how things play out. That's my take on the United States.
Just to back up on U.S. View or estimate of the Assad regime. So the U.S. didn't particularly like Assad regime, but it knew what was that and was willing to do business with it. Assad regime, for example, exported jihadists to Iraq to blackmail the U.S. government into tolerating it, and actually got that. Because eventually the U.S. government tolerated it in return for them shutting off the channel through Halab. So Assad regime knew how to do business with the U.S., and the U.S. was more or less comfortable with that. The U.S. has actually come out more than once through Obama's tenure and even Trump tenure, saying that while we don't particularly like Assad, we do not accept any of the current alternatives, so we're not going to allow them to take him over. The CIA and the U.S. government officially said that we're never going to allow any anti-aircraft weapons to enter Syria, and actually they put CIA officers, this is official, not secret, along the Turkish border to prevent any such weapons from entering Syria. And that was effective, and that handicapped the rebels, and that was an important reason Assad stayed in place. This American government actually explicitly said that we're not accepting any of the other alternatives to Assad, not particularly because they like Assad, but because he is a known, understandable quantity for them. Now, they were now willing to let go of him because the guy was not able to stabilize himself, was not doing anything to move on, and they did not have ways of probing him. So, in my opinion, at least, the U.S. tolerated the presence of Russia in Syria, and Obama met with Putin before Russia put its forces in Syria. The U.S. tolerated Iranian presence in Syria, although people might not see it from the announcements, but you can see it from practice. The arms supplies to Assad regime was coming through the American colony of Iraq, over land and in air. When the Assad regime militia fled from Syria, it fled into Iraq, into the American colony of Iraq. So while they do not particularly like him, they were doing business with him, and they didn't mind Iran propping him because, well, what are the other alternatives to them? Well, they are not willing to let people they don't trust come in, and let the people die. Who cares?
I guess my point is that, we all know that the U.S. government has done under the table agreements with Assad before, but as you said, that's history now. And at this point, there's no going back. And now the United States has to deal with the current circumstances and situations. I mean, it'd be politically disastrous for Trump, who literally bombed very publicly 52 sites or whatever, to now say, we need him back. He won't do that. So history is history, and we'll see what ends up happening next. But I think the American position is sort of like most of the positions we're going to discuss today, probably wait and see. But the early indications are that America is going to let things play out cautiously.
Yes. Now, to Russia. Russia appeared since the beginning of the rebels' attack to not willing to get involved further into Syria. And I think their calculation is they got into this as a colonial enterprise, and they have now an estimate that given the resources and given the prospects of this enterprise, the investment was not worth the return on it. So they were not willing to invest further into it. As a result, they were just managing the process. I don't think that Turkey reached an agreement with them, But Turkey is interested in not getting into a fight with Russia, so it tries not to antagonize Russia significantly. Russia right now is saying that its main interest is maintaining an air base and a naval base in Syria. It appears that the current government and transitional government is not willing to do so, but it's not saying it explicitly, and instead keeps kicking the ball forward to put the Russians in an uncomfortable position where they eventually have to withdraw without an official declaration. Russia seems to be trying to maintain a position. That's why Putin, for example, was saying, well, we can use the bases that we have used for the last 9 years to kill people for humanitarian purposes, which is laughable, but it tells you that he's searching for excuses.
Yeah, I think, at least from what I've sort of been following regarding Russia, I was reading somewhere that they're moving some assets to Libya now. That might be their next, colonial endeavor. I think that they realized that this was sort of not worth their time and energy investment. It seems like things are really heating up on the Russian border with Finland now and other countries bordering Russia and Europe. I think they got a lot more on their plate to worry about than the Assad regime or their whatever they were doing in Syria. They might keep something behind if they can. Of course, they'd like to have their nose in as much business as possible because they think they're, a major world player as well, like the United States. But I don't think Russia's going to be willing to sacrifice any more blood or treasure on the Syrian cause, at least in the near term. I think that especially, what's going on right now, Finland is really arming their border. This sounds crazy, but this cable cutting thing that happened, this is a big deal, and we should keep our eyes on this because that whole Baltic region could go up in flames. And if that happens, Russia's not going to have time to be playing caretaker in some, part of Syria where it has no real power anyways because the government that it was propping up is gone. So I would expect Russia's influence to continue to diminish. And I also wouldn't expect the Americans to be too happy about Russia keeping military bases there. And I could see them trying to pressure the new Syrian government into pushing them out as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. The piece we missed in assessing the U.S. position with respect to Syria is the U.S. sponsorship of PKK. So the U.S. seems insistent on maintaining PKK in Syria and creating something like the federal structure of their Iraq colony in Syria. Turkey hates this. Right now there is a freeze in the military situation. The expectations that Trump is going to roll over and cancel this, I think, is not accurate. Meaning, Trump may bluster about, well, we don't need to spend money on them, but actually he's not spending money on them. These are colonies and he's making use of them. He is making an indeed strategic assessment that Biden has allowed the U.S. To get distracted from its strategic enemy, China, and he needs to refocus on the strategic enemy in China. And that means he has to de-emphasize the carnage the U.S. is sponsoring in the Middle East. But on the other hand, the system and the establishment has colonial interests. And I don't think Trump is against that. He's just against overspending on it. So it's again the return on investment business. So while Trump right now is saying, well, actually we can give away PKK, I'm not sure that is going to pan out. And if the Turkish government expects that they can Biden out and get a deal with Trump, I think they will find that that wouldn't happen. Now I'm predicting, which is a dangerous thing, but I'm predicting within context. Joseph, back to you.
I feel like Trump is the kind of guy, looking at his record, if you're not a strong actor, he doesn't respect you, nor does he see any real reason to prop you up or support you that much. I could see Trump and Erdogan actually making some kind of agreement. Yeah, the United States is never going to fully disentangle from the region, but I could see some kind of under-the-table agreement being made where a lot less support is funneled into them. And let's put it this way, I don't see Trump continuing the current status quo with PKK, and it'll be in Turkey's. It'll probably be something that's in Turkey's interest what Trump ends up doing in the end. But again, it's not easy to predict these things. But
So
that would be my assessment. I don't see Trump wanting to start a conflict with Turkey because again, if he wants to get out of the region, he needs to make everybody reasonably happy and ensure stability so he can pull out and start focusing on China. So he knows that this is, his people know that Turkey PKK is a real serious issue. I see that I see a deal being made there, but it won't be a complete deal.
See, the issue with the PKK is it's either there or not there. So the US has been propping a PKK statelet in northeastern Syria for the last 10 years. It has created international structures and the United Nations resolution to give it legitimacy, a cover of legitimacy. This is an important political asset for the US. Giving it away is significant. It would be interesting if Turkey can get this, but I don't see the US giving it away. They spent the last 25 years creating something similar in their Iraq colony, and they have been very insistent on it. Now, PKK is not a very good staging horse for them, unlike the Charltons they have in northern Iraq. So there might be a possibility, but I'm not sure about that. And the issue is, if PKK goes away, the whole thing will collapse. Meaning the question is not whether Kurds exist in Syria or not, they exist, or whether the US can force the existing government to give special representation to minorities or whatever, because actually that is less injurious than what they are asking for example, for the Alawis or whatever. It's much less significant. The issue is the PKK as an organization. And if that goes away, that would be a major asset. I'm not sure about that. So I think we can move to the regional actors now. The EU is making noises that are similar to the US, but I don't see them making anything different, really. Joseph, do you see them? You follow them more closely than me. Do you see them doing anything different?
So I think the EU has, again, in my assessment, at least, they've remained relatively quiet about all of this. I have not heard too many rousing speeches for or against the new regime in Syria. I think that this is, again, the EU has its own problems to deal with. And again, I think the EU's interest is trying to get these migrants out as fast as possible. And if Syria is stabilized, doesn't matter who it is, then I don't think they care. The moral question doesn't exist for them. I think they'll be more than happy, whoever's in charge, so long as these people start going back home. And you saw a couple examples in EU. I can't remember what countries it was. Was it France? No, it was Italy and somebody else who said they're going to stop giving refugee status to Syrians. Like,
Austria.
now it's done.
Austria.
Austria, exactly, yeah. So we already have EU countries, like, within a week of the revolution, like, okay, everything's fine, now go home, no more refugees. So with a position like that, it's clear that the EU's interest is getting these people out as fast as possible. And I don't see them doing anything. Well, they don't usually do anything anyways, to be perfectly honest. But I don't see them doing anything to undermine the stability of Syria for the time being. If they can get these people out, then they'll be and the more effectively Syrian current government gets people back into Syria, the more likely they are to get actual help from the EU. So the EU will probably do nothing. And if they see real progress is being made, getting people out, they'll probably pump funding and support to help speed that process up even more. Because I've been living in Europe now for 10 years. Everywhere I go, it's just everyone wants these migrants out. Like, it's a sad state we live in, but it's the truth. I know people that are legal permanent residents in some of these EU countries they want to get them out even, you know what I mean? So I think the EU knows that their political fortunes hinge upon how well they can handle the migrant situation. And the last thing they want to do is something to mess that up.
One thing that they want to make in passing, as the Assad regime collapsed, the Arab regimes and the EU met in Aqaba in Jordan and tried actually to declare Syria a UN protectorate. And that effort has failed. That is a very good thing. the conspiracy in Aqaba failed, and that's a very good thing. That is not merely because the international situation is opportune and the immigration issue is pressing the Europeans not to push very hard on this, and also because Turkey is supporting the government. Also, the transitional government is has been careful in moving in, and that has essentially took the wind out of this conspiracy. That is a real conspiracy, not a conspiracy theory. This is an actual declaration in Aqaba, and that was an attempt to impose international protectorate on Syria.
Forgive my ignorance. What would that have resulted in?
Iraq, with minimum Western forces, but you will have to do what we say, or you won't get money, you won't get food, and you will die in your place.
I see.
And we're going to put a government of our choosing on you, made of all the thieves who spent the last 15 years negotiating all over the place with Assad and propping Assad in effect. They wanted to impose these jokers as a government in Damascus, and that failed. Okay, that I think is a good segue into looking at the regional reactions. So I think the regional reactions are interestingly almost unified. The Arab Zionist wing, meaning Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, tried as much as they could to probe Assad. When the Assad regime fell, they were in denial. Then they tried to impose a protectorate in Syria, and when this fell and they found that their masters in the US and EU and even Russia are receptive of the new transitional government, they started now talking to the transitional government while trying to figure out how can they scuttle it, and started now supporting minority rights and secularism and all kinds of things. Interestingly, they are in agreement with the Iran-allied groups. So Iran is trying to create sectarian tensions in Syria to protect the remnants of its guys, of its criminal gangs in there. The American colony of Iraq, which is also run by Iran guys, is active. Its spots are active, creating this sectarian tension. What people are missing is sectarian tension is a rope, and the rope needs two sides to push. On the Shia Alawi side, there is Iran and its guys in Iraq and Lebanon. On the Sunni sectarian side, there is Saudi Arabia and some of the Sunni sectarian in Iraq who hope to get funding and sponsorship from Mohammed Salman. So right now there is a rising sectarian tension by both sides. Both sides actually are acting in concert, which is interesting to see. Now, the only exception to that is the remnants of the old colonial regime in the Middle East, which right now amounts to the sum total of Qatar, Oman, and Kuwait. And those guys are saying, well, actually, what's happening in Syria is much less harmful than what was going on before. The empire of drugs falling and all of this fuss of immigration and external interference was really a scary thing. We're happy that things have moved. They are willing to play along as long as this government is willing to join their group of the non-Zionists, but still working within the colonial order camp. The Libya is split between the two camps, so the east side is within the Zionist camp, and the west side just visited Damascus this morning because they are in the regular old-style colonial camp. Algeria, by the way, belongs to the Zionist camp, and people are not noticing this. So Assad regime killers are fleeing to Algeria, and others are fleeing to Russia through Haftar's eastern Libya, and through Lebanon, and through Iraq. So that actually shows you the nexus of the Zionist Arab grouping and the Iran-allied grouping. They have the same opinion.
I think in general that's pretty accurate. I sort of was reading somewhere, though, that Saudi Arabia has sort of tried to... Saudi Arabia is being more constructive than UAE, which has just been totally like totally destructive in their intentions. So I don't think all these actors exactly are doing the same thing, even if they do have the same end concerns. But I think again, Egypt is the one who's really panicking right now because Sisi has made some statements already, and there have been stirrings of protest now in Egypt. I think that's the one regime that is at the most risk of potential repercussions from what happened in Syria. The other regimes seem pretty entrenched at this point. Again, though, I think all these Arab regimes will be restrained to some extent by what the great powers want, as you noted. And since the United States is allowing for this to transpire, they're going to only tolerate so much meddling, at least for now. But you always got to watch out for the UAE. You never know what they're going to do, and whatever they do, it's probably going to be something bad. But it's interesting how you mentioned, though, sort of playing up these ethnic tensions and trying to ferment sectarianism, very similar to the Iranian strategy, which is just really amazing to see that we have two actors that are supposedly enemies utilizing the same approach to destabilizing Syria. It's just one is mobilizing the Alawi, and the others are mobilizing secularists and identity minorities, ethnic minorities. They're Sunni. So we'll see how that plays out. But it's interesting. I think the Syrian people have shown a lot of resilience so far. I mean, there obviously have been some incidents, but it looks like overall, the people in general want to see a unified state. And I think it's really going to depend, the will of the people. If the people can remain united and willing to work with this new government, it's going to be a lot harder for these Arab regimes to topple it. But if this unity that we see so far starts to tear apart, then the Arab regimes are going to attack it like vultures. All right. So really, the Syrian people hold the fate of their country in their own hands, in this regard, at least.
So, a couple of comments about the stand of the military regime in Egypt. Reports of demonstrations in Egypt are not correct. There has been none. But the regime is scared to death, and you have to understand how they think to understand this, because they are a replica of the Syrian regime. So when they see the Syrian regime collapsing, they are essentially seeing a nightmare in reality, because they look there and see this could be our future. Some of them, when you hear them, especially their media voices, they are scared to death, because when they see the media mouthpieces of the Syrian regime scurrying around to hide, they are just going out of their minds, because they say, well, these are exactly like us, and look at them today. This is scary. So that's why they are scared, not because there are material reasons for them to be scared. Saudi Arabia has been more forthcoming in trying to pretend to be pro-regime and engage the transitional government. But that doesn't mean it is any less harmful than the UAE. Actually, it has some arms inside the transitional government. And it's raising the sectarian tension of let's eradicate Alawis. And they have some rabid, nasty characters. And there are a lot of Syria historically, since the colonial era, has been a staging ground for all kinds of external actors. So go back to 1920s and you'll see it. So nothing new is happening really. Jordan has actors and is trying to protect them and promote them. The only good thing working for the people is they know them, they are well known. And they have all been exposed over the last 10 years. So that's why they are not very effective. Okay, that's all I have to say.
We got one more country. How about Israel?
Oh, that's an important part. Do you want to start, Joseph?
Well, I think, again, Israel is doing what Israel always does, which is maximizing their own position as quickly as possible before anybody catches wind of it. So, as the Assad regime was literally running out of the country, they were already bombing multiple military sites. I think it's really interesting. Israel's bombing of the passport and immigration facility. Like there had to be a lot of secrets in there. Like I'm not a conspiracy theorist normally, but why attack that? Of all the sites, they made a point to bomb that building that handled all the immigration paperwork. I'm assuming they knew something, or they already had some deal in the past that didn't want to be revealed. So Israel, has done what it could do to maximize its own defensive position. At least that's what it's claiming to do by claiming more Syrian territory and taking out weapons facilities or whatever they're claiming that they bombed. Again, I don't really know what Israel's long-term plan is. Will they be restrained at all by the Trump administration? And I don't know. I think Israel's, for me, the hardest one to predict. There's a lot of different things they could do. I think Israel would they always benefit from destabilized regions, so too much stability is bad for them. So they'll probably never let Syrian government actually develop into something successful. They'll always do something to interfere. But how much interference is the real question? Do they want to unleash potential all-out chaos, which means potentially their own security becomes at risk, or to be a type of controlled chaos, which is what I would see. They would probably prefer a type of controlled chaos. It gives them justification for their aggressive, offensive approach to the region. And that's what I see for now with Israel. But I don't know. I think Israel's the hardest one to understand what their interests are in this particular case, other than the obvious. So go ahead.
So I'll retreat to the easier topic of understanding what's happening rather than predicting. Joseph was on the harder grounds. I'll come back to the easier grounds. What Israel is doing by its encroachments on the Julan and Dar'a is attempting to put the transitional government in one of two awkward positions. Either engage them and in the process give in to their demands, because if they engage them politically in the current state, they will have to give in. They are in a weak position. Or engage them militarily, and then Israel becomes a political actor in Syria, because now it can hit at will wherever it wants and become a political actor. So the fact that they are not engaging them either way is actually, I think, is a smart tactic. Where things go from there, I agree with Joseph that Israel would want to maintain a hand and to maintain quote-unquote engagement in Syria by occupying and trying to draw any government into either giving in to its demands, and these will include expanding its colonial presence in Syria further, occupation, or failing this, if the government confronts them militarily, well, it's in a weak position because they essentially destroyed all the Syrian army heavy weapons. That would allow Israel to become a political actor by going after whomever it doesn't want in Syria. So for the coming few years, I think it will continue to exist, and Trump wouldn't mind that. Yeah, and whoever is in charge in Damascus will have to continue to manage this. I don't see how they can manage it. There are ways, creative ways, but it's hard to predict, because it's hard to predict even what direction the current transitional government is going to go. I'm not sure they even have a clear idea.
Well, I think one thing I've picked up on from what I've been following, reading, is they do not want to be a revolutionary regime. They don't want to be Iran 2.0. And I think that's probably the smartest move they could make right now. Despite many people wanting to see that it would be the absolute worst decision. They need to focus on building institutions and internal stability and slowly rebuilding up the military and infrastructure, rather than going out with some kind of jihadist, we're going to retake Quds agenda, which Iran never actually even did anyways. So I think what they're doing right now is pragmatic, strategically sensible. And, again, we never know what the future holds, but I think thus far I've seen a lot of good decisions being made by the leadership. And inshallah continues. But of course, you know, many challenges are to come, and they'll be coming very soon, especially in about a month.
I think that's about wraps it up.
I agree. Shabab, thank you. I think this was fantastic. Bismillah. Till next time.